I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. From the poem Trees by Joyce Kilmer.
Hey Chotu, what are you up to? Lying on your back and rubbing yourself against that moss growing on that boulder? Do you think the moss is a back scratcher?
You are right, Kunti. The moss is providing a rough surface for Chotu to rub against and relieve himself of any itchiness. And also, he must be finding it nice and cool, as moss always has moisture in it.
What kind of plant is moss, Dadaji?
Dadaji begins by explaining to Kunti that moss, along with other primitive plants like liverworts, was the first land plant to appear on our planet about 470 million years ago. In the oceans, it was the algae.
As you know, Kunti, it was thanks to these primitive plants that oxygen was introduced into our atmosphere by the process of photosynthesis. All plants use the sun's energy to make their food from carbon dioxide and release oxygen as a byproduct.
This moss has very tiny roots.
Actually, they are not true roots, as they do not absorb water from the soil like the roots of other plants. In fact, you may notice that moss grows anywhere, not only on soil. It grows on damp walls, on bricks, and on rocks.
And it was these primitive plants, he told Kunti, that triggered the process of soil formation from rocks by releasing acids when our planet only had a crusty mantle of rocks.
But Dadaji, I don't see any flowers in the moss plant.
These prehistoric plants, moss, liverwort, algae, and ferns, do not produce flowers or seeds. Instead, they produce spores. That is why botanists classify them as cryptogams, the non-flowering plants.
Dadaji, isn't that a fern plant growing from the wall? There are brown spots on the underside of its leaves. Do the pores come out from these brown spots?
Bilkul sahi. And the brown spots are called sporangia.
These ferns look so much like the other plants, only they don't produce seeds and flowers.
True. The ferns have true roots and leaves like the higher plants. They even have vascular tissue.
Vascular tissue? What's that?
It's the pipes called xylem that transport water and phloem that transport food in the plants.
So, are the ferns given a special place among the cryptogams?
Oh yes! The ferns are called pteridophytes. The algae, which have any kind of shape, are classified as thallophytes. Mosses and liverworts, which have leaf-like and false root-like structures, are grouped under bryophytes.
Did you get that, Chotu? Too complicated for you to understand. Today, I am getting to learn so many new names. Is there a special name given to plants because they can make their own food?
Oh yes! All green plants which contain chlorophyll and make their own food are classified as autotrophs. And animals who depend on ready-made food are called heterotrophs. So, that's 2 more names to your list.
What about flowering plants, Dadaji? What is their story?
I am so glad my Kunti is showing so much interest. You have the curiosity of a true scientist.
It is such fun listening to all your stories, Dadaji. You are teaching me so many things. With your help, I will become a scientist.
Coming back to what you are asking, Those plants that produce flowers and seeds are called phanerogams. Here again, there are two types. The gymnosperms, which produce naked seeds which are not enclosed in fruits, and the angiosperms, which produce seeds inside fruits.
But where are the gymnosperms? I don't see any.
That is because most gymnosperms grow in the colder temperate climate. There are lots of gymnosperm trees like the deodar and pine trees in the Himalayas.
Oh, अरे हाँ. Master जी ने सिखाया था. Those trees have a conical shape and their seeds appear on cones. Their leaves are like fine needles so that the snow easily slides off, just like the Christmas tree, which is shown in our storybooks.
Yes, the plants that we have around here are all angiosperms because their seeds are always inside their fruits, not exposed as in gymnosperms.
Like the tomato and brinjal plants that Pitaji is growing in our kitchen garden?
And many more. The angiosperms are a huge group of plants. They too are further divided into monocots and dicots.
What cot? The cot a little baby sleeps in?
मजाक कर रही है? Are you cracking a joke? Monocots are plants that have only one baby leaf or cotyledon in their seeds.
That means dicot seeds have two baby leaves, like the two fleshy parts of green peas and peanuts.
बिल्कुल सही. You catch on so well. Rice, maize, grasses are examples of monocots.
Wow, nature is so diverse and so intricate.
With good reason.
I just noticed that the leaves of the tomato and brinjal plants have branched veins, while the leaves of grasses and the rice in the paddy fields near our home have straight parallel veins.
Shabash! That is another difference between monocots and dicots. The leaves of monocots have parallel venation and the leaves of dicots have reticulate venation. Let me see if you can tell me the third difference which lies in their roots.
Is it that the root of the monocot grass are bushy, all of the same length, and the roots of the dicot tomato are branched? The branched roots coming out from the one main root?
Full marks! The bushy roots of the monocots are called fibrous, and the branched roots of the dicots are called taproots, as there is one main taproot from which other smaller branches spread outwards. Now, something more interesting. There are some roots that we can eat. Can you name any?
I know. The carrot, beetroot, radish, sweet potato, ginger.
Brilliant! These are taproots that store food. So, we cultivate them. Did you know that the first carrots were purple and yellow besides orange? Later on, the orange ones were repeatedly cultivated.
The flowers of all angiosperms always look so attractive. Ma loves to adorn her hair with the flowers of mogra or rose. And on special occasions, we hang garlands of flowers and mango leaves on our doors. Can you tell me the story of flowers, Dadaji?
Why do you think are flowers the most attractive parts of a plant?
To attract birds, bees, and butterflies. But why do flowers want to come up to them?
Let us take this jaswanti or shoe flower as an example, and I will tell you its story. Flowers are the reproductive parts of plants. They look so attractive and showy as they need to attract their pollinators, insects or birds, or even small mammals like squirrels or bats.
What are pollinators? Why are insects, birds, or mammals their pollinators?
Let us start at the very beginning. Do you see this green cup shape at the end of the flower stalk? That is called the calyx.
The calyx seems to be made up of small leaves joined together.
Exactly. Each of those leaf-like structures is called a sepal. And the sepal is holding the very colorful red petals.
Do the bright colors of the petals attract pollinators?
Bilkul sahi. The flower uses all kinds of tricks to lure pollinators. Some flowers have a very pleasant fragrance.
And some offer a sweet liquid called nectar, which butterflies and small birds like to drink, right?
Ha. And bees collect nectar and take it to their hives, where other worker bees turn it into honey, which they feed their young larvae with.
But what does the flower gain in return?
I am coming to that. Do you see this long string-like structure in the center, which has this bunch of little stalks with yellow heads? That is the male part of the flower, called stamen. And the yellow heads are the anthers. The anthers contain a yellowish powder called pollen.
And what is this central stalk which has a sticky tip?
That is the female part of the flower called pistil, which ends in a sticky tip called stigma. While the pollinator moves towards the nectary deep inside the flower, it accidentally rubs against the pollen, and then it may move a little ahead towards the stigma.
Does the pollen on the body of the insect or bird get stuck to the stigma?
It does. And this transfer of pollen to the stigma is called pollination.
Chotu, I don't think you will ever be a pollinator. You're only interested in chasing squirrels and cats. You don't ever want to rub your nose on the pollen of flowers. But what about the flowers of grasses, rice and wheat? They are not so showy. How do they attract their pollinators, Dadaji?
Good question. Not all flowers need insects, birds, and mammals to pollinate. Some simply get pollinated by the wind. Their very light pollen grains get blown onto their stigmas.
And what happens after pollination, Dadaji?
The story is not yet over. After being pollinated, the pollen grain travels inside the central stalk, the pistil, all the way down to this bulging part, the ovary. Now, let me cut this flower longitudinally to show you how the ovary looks inside.
Ayyo, the ovules look like very tiny baby seeds.
बिल्कुल ठीक बात है. You hit the nail on the head. Once the pollen grain enters the ovary and fuses with these ovules, they turn into seeds. And at the same time, the ovule turns into the fruit. The fusion of the pollen with the ovule is called fertilization.
So, only after fertilization do we get to eat the fruit, isn't it?
Now, let me see if you can answer this question. Some plants do not produce fleshy, juicy fruits for us to eat. Do we always eat the fruit of a plant if it is not poisonous?
That is an easy one, Dadaji. we eat fleshy fruits like mangoes and chikus. But sometimes, when the fruit is not so fleshy, then we eat the seeds like peanuts, green peas, rice, wheat.
तू बहुत smart है कुंती. You are absolutely right. So, we eat the roots, stems, leaves, fruits and seeds of a plant. Some of the locals in the villages even cook flowers into bhajis.
Yes, I remember. Jaya Chachi had made a delicious bhaji out of the flowers of bananas when we had gone to visit her.
Now, I have to tell you something very interesting. We see insects eating up the leaves of plants, especially in the monsoons. But did you know that there are some plants that eat insects?
Ayyo, why would they want to do that?
In places where the soil does not have enough nitrogen for the plants to build up proteins from, they depend on insects to get their proteins.
But how do the plants catch the insects? They cannot run after them, nor do they have long, sticky tongues like lizards.
Aha! The plants, first of all, attract the insects in different ways. In the Satara district, on the Kas plateau, the sundew plants grow in the monsoons. These plants have tiny hair that give out a secretion that shines in the sun and looks like morning dew. Hence their name, sundew.
Dadaji tells Kunti the intriguing story of how insects get attracted by the shiny droplets. But once they land on them, woe betide, they get stuck. The hair surrounds the insect and then digests it just like that. Poof!
That sounds like a thriller story. Any other interesting plants, Dadaji?
There are hundreds and hundreds of very fascinating plants. Even if I have to spend the rest of my life telling you about them, I wouldn't be able to cover all of them.
Whoa, so many.
But I must show you a very special plant which I came across the other day. It's not far from here.
Chotu, stop chasing that crow. Come with us to see this special plant.
Here you are. See this climbing plant?
Wow, what amazing flowers it has. They look like kandils.
Indeed, the plant is called kandil because of its lantern-like flowers. More commonly, it is called the Ceropegia or fly trap.
Do they also eat insects like flies?
They do not eat insects, but they trap insects inside them.
Why would the flower want to do such a thing?
To ensure that the fly pollinates them. Once the insect perches near its mouth, it is bound to slide inside into this sac at the base.
Dadaji shows Kunti slippery hair pointing downwards that make sure the flies tumble in. The hair inside then blocks its escape. The fly, while struggling inside the sac, is sure to collect some pollen on its body and rub it against the flower's stigma.
So, the flower is sure to get pollinated. And will the flower allow the fly to escape after that? Or does it have to call out, "Open sesame," like in the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves?
The fly does not have to do anything. The hair inside the tube of the flower automatically move upwards for the fly to exit.
Poor insect. Don't you agree, Chotu? How strangely do some plants behave?
Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you this. There are some other plants that do not have the green pigment which enables most plants to make their own food by photosynthesis. One of them is the cuscuta.
So, where do they get their food from?
They draw nourishment from other plants using special roots called haustoria that penetrate deep into the tissues of their host plants. These plants that are dependent on other plants are called parasites.
I know. There is such a plant growing all over a lemon bush near my school. It is not green and only has long yellow stems, looking like some string tied all around the lemon bush.
That's right. That must be the parasite Cuscuta.
Hey Chotu, what are you rolling on the ground with your paw? Oh, it's a fig, the fruit which has fallen from that banyan tree. By the way, Dadaji, I have never seen any banyan or peepal trees producing flowers. They seem to directly produce these figs.
My dear Kunti, what we call a fig is not just one fruit. There are hundreds of teeny weeny fruits inside it called pips. And the pips are formed after the hundreds of flowers inside it get pollinated. Many trees produce figs. Banyan, peepal, umber, gular, the edible figs.
But how do the flowers get pollinated if they're hidden inside the fig?
That is the fig's secret.
Please, do tell me the secret story, Dadaji.
Let us examine Chotu's fig. Do you see this very tiny hole here? A female wasp enters the fig through this hole. Now, let me cut open the fig. Do you see all these tiny flowers?
Dadaji tells the story of how, on entering, the wasp first unloads the pollen which she has brought from the male flowers of another fig of the same tree species in her pouches and spreads it all over the stigma of the female flowers inside, thus pollinating them. Only then does she lay her eggs inside the fig. The tiny pollinated flowers turn into equally tiny fruits or pips.
How amazing is that?
And now, dear Kunti, I would like to remind you of the time we had visited Vijaya Mami. Do you remember the trees that were growing in the creek water?
Oh yes, the mangroves. They had special stilt roots to ensure they did not topple over with the force of the waves, and also upwards growing pencil-like roots, the pneumatophores, which have breathing holes in them, as inside the waterlogged soil there are no air spaces for them to breathe.
And they are very important for the environment too.
Ah, yes, I know. Mangroves protect the inland places from the force of winds and waves during cyclones and tsunamis.
Bilkul sahi.
Dadaji, I am now full of awe for all that plants do. How could we ever have survived without plants? I do want other people to know how plants can be of such immense importance to us and to our planet. I am going to make some posters and put them outside my school and all over town.
And so, Kunti makes several posters with Dadaji's help. Please plant as many trees as you can. They are our hope to fight global warming and climate change. Newly planted saplings need your care. Please water them regularly and protect them with a wire mesh. Please do not cut down trees for trivial reasons. They give us our roti, kapda and makan. Other creatures need trees too.
पेड़ लगाओ प्रदूषण से दूर रहो पेड़ की छाया में बैठ कर प्रार्थना करो न है पेड़ न रहे पशुओं का जंगल, न है पेड़ न है जल, नहीं होते मौसम।